Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. All right everybody, it's Wednesday, so that means we are back with a new episode of the In All Things podcast. My name is Mitch Frost. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. A little bit sleepy today. It's, I don't know, this Wednesday morning is feeling like a Monday to me.
Yeah, I had one of those nights last night. I struggled to sleep. And, it's like last week we were talking about it being fall and feeling great. And like summer has kind of come back a little bit this week. So that's not fun.
No, I'm over it.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Yeah, like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm not a big caffeine person, but today I have a Red Bull. So that shows you the day I'm having. Okay,
well, I have in my cup, it's disguised. It's a Spark. So there's caffeine all over the place here.
Yep.
We need it.
But we need it. It's towards the end of September as we're recording this, but we were just talking about the song September by Fire and Wind.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, sir.
Yeah. Something like that.
Earth, Wind, and Fire. Yeah, I'm old
some
enough
band
to know.
That I don't
know. That's okay.
know.
Yeah, it's 70s, when I was a kid. So.
But we were talking about how the song is all about the 21st of September, which was last Tuesday, and how what actually happened on the 21st of September, what made it such a big day to make this unbelievable song, right? Like why? Why did they decide on the 21st of September they were going to write this song that would go on to be this immensely popular song that everybody was going to talk about? It just makes no sense.
Nope. But
anyway, that's the conversation we've been having this morning around the office. But let's go ahead and get started here. This past weekend at Sycamore Creek, which is the church that we both work at, we had a day called Food and Fun, because that's what we called it.
Right.
But essentially what it was is after both services this week, we took everybody outside. We had a day of inflatables and dunk tanks and hot dogs and all kinds of things. It was pretty fun. It felt like normal church again, so that was exciting. How did you feel about it?
It was great. Somebody asked me, did you have a huge crowd? I said, no, it was a normal crowd, but it was awesome to see people having community with each other. And we kind of figured our services end at 12, the second service, and we figured by 12:30 people would dissipate. But it was like 12:45. People were still hanging out. They loved it. And so how'd you like the dunk tank?
I loved it, actually. Yeah. I have to be honest, a couple months ago when we started playing this, I was like, can we please get a dunk tank? Because I've never been in one before, and I volunteered to do it the whole time. But it changed because people wanted you in there too.
Yes.
So we ended up splitting the time. I did it after the first service for the full 40 minutes getting dunked nonstop in the coldest part of the morning.
Yes.
And then after the second service, I was in there for a little bit, and then something fun happened. So I got a really bad migraine.
You did, yeah.
And I get these like twice a year, probably. I've had them ever since I was like 15. The first one I ever had was on a soccer field. But what happens is like it kind of comes on super suddenly. Lexi knew right in that moment when it happened that we had to leave, because it happens. I lose pretty much all my vision. Can't drive. I have driven with one before. It's not safe. Lose my vision. Which means that's my window to get home, lock myself in my room with all the lights off, and then after the vision comes back, both my arms go numb, my mouth goes numb. It's the same thing every time. Every time since I was 15, it's the same process. And then as soon as the numbness goes away, boom, worst migraine I've ever had, and it usually lasts for 24 hours. Even the next day, like too much motion, forward and back, I still feel it. So
do you think the dunk tank had anything to do with it?
No, I've been trying to find a trigger or something, and I never have been able
Lexi came and got me in the guest central room, and I was waiting for guests after the service. Because you got to get to the tank now. It's empty. Mitch can't do it anymore. I was like, okay, I was wanting to put this off as long as possible, but I ran to my office, got my clothes, changed in my swimming trunks, and got out there. And it was fun. I mean, the kids enjoyed that, and I know a lot of them didn't hit the target, but then Terry Johnson brought them up there and let them hit the target with their hands and dunked me. So it was fun. And seeing my one of my grandsons dunking me, he really enjoyed that, watching Chase have all that joy. So it was fun. It was a great day.
It was. And like you said, it was just good to see people interacting and kind of getting to know new people and just hang out outside of the church. And I don't know, it was just fun. It was a good time. Any new developments besides that in your life this week? Any other things that you feel worth sharing right now?
My wife and I were able to get away, which was awesome. Friday, we went to Cincinnati. The church gave us a little overnight trip to a Reds game, a hotel, and it was for our 10-year anniversary of being here. So that was a lot of fun. Friday, we left early. We had breakfast out, lunch out, dinner out at the ballpark, and we just didn't think about much else about each other. That was it. We just kind of focused on each other and had a great time just, wasn't long enough. But we came back on Saturday afternoon. But that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Friday night, we had a fifth quarter party here with the students. So there was a football game at Pickerington North, which is in the backyard of our church. And we offered a fifth quarter party. So we had made a bunch of hot dogs and had a bunch of lawn games and a fire pit. And we probably had 100 different students there come and go over the couple hours that we had it. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We've never really done an event like that here, so it was exciting. And then this Friday, what we're preparing for is an all-nighter lock-in, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So prepping
This is
for
why
that.
I quit. That's why I quit youth ministry.
Yeah.
Was lock-ins.
Yeah, I
They're
understand.
so much fun, but the way you feel for the next couple of days.
I was listening to a podcast, and he said every lock-in you do, you gain 10 years. So it just speeds you up,
Right.
But I don't know. I'm excited, but
Yes.
it's my first one really to do it. So I'll see how
That's
I
going
feel
to be awesome.
on Saturday.
Students are going to love it. Yeah.
But besides that, I got to play soccer on Monday night with a high school varsity soccer team in Circleville. One of my old friends from college coaches a team in Circleville, and then one of our other friends who was in my wedding was in town, and they had an off week from playing a game, and so they were like, hey, we want you guys to come scrimmage against our varsity team. And I was like, awesome. So I dusted my cleats off. It's been a while since I've played. I still had some good plays and things I could do on the field, but that is the oldest I've felt in a long time. I'm 22, but being out there with high school juniors and seniors, I was like, when did I get old? When did I get out of shape? It was a little bit embarrassing.
It's a different kind of conditioning.
Yeah.
I remember I played a little bit of soccer in high school, and man, that's nothing compares. I
Yeah.
know you're big on soccer. Soccer is not my, favorite sport, but the conditioning for soccer was definitely above everything else I've ever done.
I came home and I was like telling Lexi what I just told you, like, geez, I'm out of shape. And I don't remember, being that not able to keep up with people. And she's like, well, you got to remember when you played, it was like an hour and a half practice every single day. Like that was just your life. So of course you were able to do all of those things. And I was like, yeah, that's true, but it's still frustrating.
I hate it. I hate getting old. I hate that feeling. Oh man.
Yeah. But the whole time I was out there, as fun as it was, I had a blast. I'm super sore today, but I had a blast. But the whole time I'm out there, I'm just thinking, man, I wish I could run and be like those people.
Yes.
Now, I blew up my knee when I was early on in high school, so I haven't been able to run for a long time, really. But I felt myself comparing myself to the younger players the entire time I was out there. And so that kind of is an easy segue into the conversation that I want to have with you today about the comparison trap.
Right.
And I want to start at a very superficial level of just the ways that we compare ourselves to people around us. But this conversation is going to be awesome because I think this is something that really everybody struggles with, even if they don't realize it. It's kind of natural. It's an instinct part of who we are. We compare ourselves to others all the time. And so I just thought it would be an interesting conversation to have today. And if you didn't listen to the episode from last week about influence, I think this is almost the perfect next step for a conversation like that, because when an influence that somebody has in your life becomes too much and you start comparing yourself to that person kind of becomes the standard for everything you do, it can become really unhealthy. And so I think we had an awesome conversation about influence last week. So let's just kind of continue it into the unhealthy side of comparing yourself to other people. Steve, have you ever compared yourself to another person in your life?
Never, ever.
Wow,
Yeah, right.
impressive.
I mean, it's like every day, isn't it? I feel like all the time, every week, it's a struggle. Even I'll go back to what we just talked about last Friday. So my wife and I, we left in the morning to go to Cincinnati, but on the way from here to Cincinnati is the Jeffersonville outlets. And she's like, we need to get you some new clothes. You're on the stage all the time. You're always on video. You need to get some fresh clothes. And so even in that, it's like the whole comparison. I want to be cool, but I am 51. But I have to be honest. I want to be comfortable, but I don't want to be outdated. I want to be relevant, and there's other pastors I look at and the way they dress but I don't want to be like copycat. So it's always in your head, no matter what you're doing. If you don't admit that, I think you're lying to yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with the superficial side of the comparison trap with clothes and the way we look and the way we dress and even the things we post. Like, let's start there. Because I think, especially in the world of social media, our comparison trap on the superficial world has sped up because you can always look at somebody else who's doing life better than you and looks better than you and has the more perfect life than you do. It's everywhere all the time.
Right.
And so for me, I know especially when I was younger, this was like a big struggle of mine. Like I would legitimately open social media and find myself like constantly wishing that I was like that person I was looking at, or I would go to their page. Oh, who's this person? Oh my gosh, look at the amount of followers they have. Look at where they just went on vacation. Look at the girlfriend they have. Like in high school, it was a really, really big struggle for me. And we're going to continue this conversation into how it is a struggle for me today. It's a little bit different than this kind of surfacey looks, but it used to be a really, really big deal for me because I was constantly trying to imitate people around me and trying to compare myself. Man, I don't look as good as them. I don't sound as good as them, blah, 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 blah. But I think it starts very superficial for everybody. We compare ourselves to people.
I agree. I mean, I have a 13-year-old, so I see it in him more than I saw it in my older kids, the ones that didn't have as much social media, but as it's become bigger. Did you know? I mean, I don't know if you saw this in the news about Instagram for kids. They were trying to get that started, and it was getting close to being launched, and then they shut it down because of all the negative feedback that they got about how it's going to affect. Facebook owns Instagram, obviously, but they were looking at the demographic of like preteens and younger and how they're not targeting them enough and how much money could be made there. Mm-hmm. But then they said from studies that the negative effects that it's going to have on those kids is, because they see it with teenagers like you're just talking about, and I see it all the time. So yeah, it starts on the superficial level, and they look at what those kids are wearing, what shoes they have. I mean, coach a baseball team. My son wants to have the bat that the other kids have, the $400 bat, because it hits better, right? Mm-hmm. Like, everything is about comparison. Clothing is where it starts with kids, I think.
Yeah.
Hairstyles, all that.
But I think we do it too as adults. I mean, you just said you went shopping,
I did,
right?
Yeah,
and we do that because we're thinking, okay, we got to look good. And there's definitely an element to that is important. You want to be comfortable and confident and all of those different types of things. But where else does it go for you past clothing? Still on the surface level, what other things do you find yourself comparing about yourself to other people?
Superficial, I guess, on the clothing level, it's the body image. We think that's just a female thing. And I think it is bigger for girls. Like a couple of years ago, it became popular to have a dad bod. But I mean, taking your shirt off at the beach, it's like one of those things that you feel insecure about, when you don't feel like you're in that shape. And you see so many pictures, so many guys. I mean, I know I'm 51, but Tom Brady's 44 now. I'm like, how is he doing it, staying in that shape? And I'm thinking, is he really enjoying the diet that he has? I wouldn't enjoy his diet or his workout routines. But man, I look at myself sometimes, and I know we're going to get to this, but the comparison thing is you always can find people that look so much better than you, and you find people that look a lot worse than you, and that's dangerous either direction, because that's not what it's about. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But yeah, I think that's one of those areas. Superficially, I look at those things, my hair, like I joke about it sometimes, like losing my hair, but you're not one to be bald. But I mean, there's plenty of people that wear bald well. I don't know if I have the head for that, but those are things that I feel insecure about, and I compare myself to, and like, what can I do about that? But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this conversation of superficial comparisons is huge. For me, this is funny because I know some people will laugh, but I've never been able to put weight on. And I've gone through seasons of trying to put muscle on or weight on or stuff myself and all these things, and I can't. And some people say, well, okay, keep it to yourself. That's a great problem to have. But really, there's been times where I'm like, dang, I hate the way I look because I cannot put muscle on, So it's just like, that's the thing you said, though, is it doesn't matter where you are in life, what you look like, how much money you have. There's always somebody you can compare yourself to, always. And for me, in the body image world, I got past the point of comparing myself to like the athletes and like the actors and stuff like that, because they can spend millions of dollars on their body, and that's kind of what they do for a living. So I've moved past that. It's more of just people that I see in my day-to-day life, or people that go to church or whatever, and I'm like, dang, what I would give to look like you, So I feel like I've thankfully taken a step back from the people that are like larger than life, comparison that you could do. But man, it's every day. It's all the time. We see people that we're just little things. We're like, man, I wish I was like that. I wish I looked like that. I wish I had the accent like that. I wish, whatever it may be for you. Like, true. It's just comparisons everywhere.
It is true. I saw the commercial yesterday morning, I think it was, and I had to like look at the screen, like they're talking about how to gain 25 pounds in like a couple of months. I was like, who wants to do that? Because I'm thinking the opposite. If I could drop 20 pounds, that would be perfect, But there you are admitting that. And that's hard to admit. Like, I would rather be your size, but then, probably it'll happen in time, as you get older. But seriously, I know it's not fun to admit it, but we'll look at this video and analyze that. And if I, don't slouch too much because then you look fatter, that's what somebody told me. I won't say who.
Yeah. It's everywhere. And we're constantly creating this imaginary standard of what we're supposed to look like and what we're supposed to be like, and then projecting that onto other people. Either they're not meeting it and we are, or we're not meeting it and we wish we were. So it's just like, it's really, really dangerous. And so I just want to kind of get into this balance between who should we compare ourselves to? Is there a healthy way to compare yourselves to other people? Or should we just constantly say, well, God made me this way, so I don't need to change. I don't need to make myself better. I don't need to improve at all. I'm good the way I am. So I think there's this healthy balance between the two. Psychology Today, which is a website, obviously, that writes all kinds of articles about psychology and studies in psychology. They put out an article recently about this idea of the comparison trap. And they had a really interesting quote here about kind of how it started, or at least what they can kind of trace this, they call it social comparison theory, back to. So I just want to read that real quick. It says, social comparison theory was first put forth in 1954 by psychologist Leon Fetzinger, who hypothesized that we make comparisons as a way of evaluating ourselves. At its root, the impulse is connected to the instant judgments we make of other people, a key element of the brain's social cognition network that can be traced to the evolutionary need to protect oneself and assess threats. So, just a way to sum that up, their whole point is the reason why we constantly compare ourselves to other people is because we are looking out for ourselves all the time. Even if you are the most giving, generous, kind-hearted, selfless person, they believe at a deep core rooted level, you are only looking out for yourself, and you are making judgments based on who you want to be like, who you are, what's going to protect you, all these different kind of things. How do you feel about a quote like that?
You know what? I think it's true. I think self-preservation is one of those instincts that we're given, that we're born with. But this is how it manifests itself. Now, in the way that the instant judgments, I thought that was an interesting use of words in that statement that you read, because we instantly judge each other, but we're instantly judging ourselves all the time. And so we're judging others, judging ourselves, and it's all because we want to make sure that we can survive, because survival is at our core, right? And so if we're better than other people, then we're going to have a better chance of surviving. And that's why we do so many things that we do. That's why we work out. That's why we buy certain clothes. That's why we take care of our families and have good jobs and try to make more money and all that stuff. It's a constant cycle of surviving, comparing. It goes on and on. So I agree with that.
Yeah, but I guess maybe we need to work into, is this okay? Like, because obviously this article, this idea of, the social comparison theory that they wrote about, it's not based on faith, right? They're not probably writing this through a Christian lens or what Jesus has done, anything like that. So let's ask the question, is it right for us to have this nature that is constantly judgmental and self-preserving and self-protective and looking out for, like, how do we balance that? Because if they're writing from a place of saying, you, regardless of who you are, you have that in your heart. That's who you are at the core of your being. How do we deal with that?
That's really tough, because I don't want to just give spiritual cliche answers today, because that's, we can say, well, we're supposed to be like Jesus. Well, when it comes to fashion, he wore a robe, right? And sandals.
I guess that's what we have to do.
He probably had long hair, so you're doing better than me. So I don't know. Like, that's kind of crazy. We can't just try to, I think, bring something from 2,000 years ago like that, like style and all that into it. So Yeah, what was the question?
like how do we kind of balance this idea of
So Jesus, I mean, talked a lot about serving others, right?
Yeah.
So we're supposed to serve other people, put other people first, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. One of my favorite verses, and I've shared it with our staff several times, just like, you know how sometimes you get a verse that is like your verse for that year or for that time period, like Galatians 1:10. I don't have it memorized, but it's like Paul was saying, if it's about pleasing others and not pleasing God, then I've missed the mark.
Yeah,
like,
I have it written right here.
Oh, do you?
Actually.
Okay,
yeah.
well,
Galatians 1:10. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant.
Right. So you can't just focus on pleasing people, because then you're not going to be doing what Christ would want you to do. But in the same vein, you know, that applies in every area of our lives, in all things that we're talking about. But then when you get to the nitty gritty of like some of the superficial things, how do you decide? How do you determine like that? But to I think where we have to really examine our hearts is if we're judging people and not loving people because of the way they look, by the way they dress, by their style, or then we've lost it. We've missed the mark, and we're gotten way off track.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I think this conversation does go deeper than surface, right?
Sure,
so let's kind of open it up to, we compare ourselves to people all the time. And I think people listening might look at you and me and say, okay, well, they only compare themselves to people who are other pastors or people who speak better than them or have bigger churches, which is true. We do that. But we also compare ourselves to people who just live better than we do, or who have, nicer things than we do sometimes, or who make more money than we do, or who, just live bolder in their faith than we ever do. Like, we compare ourselves all the time. It's not, for those of us who work at a church, we don't just look at other pastors. We look at everybody, and we're constantly like comparing ourselves to them. Now, I do want to raise an interesting dilemma here. Galatians 1:10 we just read, where Paul says, obviously, if my goal is to please other people, I'm not serving Jesus. But Paul also says in Corinthians 10:33, I too try to please everyone in everything I do. I don't just do what is best for me. I do what is best for others so that many may be saved. Right. If this kind of presents this interesting dilemma here, because we have on one side the same author who says, if I'm trying to please other people, then I'm not serving God at all. But on the same vein, in everything I do, I'm trying to please other people so that people can be saved. Right. How do we live in this balance? Like, where's the balance between not comparing yourself to other people to the extent of you are a slave to everything they say, everything they do, everything they post. You want to be like them. You are comparing yourself to them all the time. But also, having this healthy balance of serving them and loving them and even being sharpened by them, like we talked about last week. Where's this balance at?
Like, we're supposed to be bringing people to Christ. So if you brought up Paul, so let's talk about Paul for a minute. I was at a preaching conference on Monday, and it's funny because when you have 4 different main speakers and they don't compare what they're going to speak on, 2 of them spoke on the same passage. So it's fresh in my mind, Acts chapter 16, where Paul was in Athens, and he got there, and he arrived there, and really it wasn't necessarily the plan to get there when he did, but he got there and realized they were worshiping like thousands of different gods, but they had one God. You remember the story that was a statue that was dedicated to the unknown God. And he says, I'm here to tell you who that is. The whole point is he contextualized his message for that group of people. He became what they needed him to be and related to them in a way so that they would listen to his message. And I think that's what Paul's saying when you read that scripture from Corinthians, is that becoming all things to all men so that some might be saved. That might just be the version I learned it in. Maybe it's the same verse, but the idea of being relatable in our society. Why do I care what I wear? Well, that's superficial, but also I don't want people to tune me out by the way I look because I look outdated. But that's, I want to be relevant, and I think Paul was relevant in what he did, but the message is what mattered. But comparing, I think we're maybe rabbit trailing here a little bit, but the comparing ourselves when it comes to pastors and ministry. I think what you said a minute ago is true. We go beyond other pastors, other ministries, other churches, but I think that's a big thing that we start with, because I think everybody that's listening out there, it's not all pastors, most are not. So they're in their fields of work or in their family, and what they're doing is comparing themselves as a mother, father, husband and wife, as an employee at whatever they do. And they're like, oh, I'm not as good as them. I'm lacking what they are. I don't have the house they have. I'm not driving the cars they have. I don't have the lifestyle, the vacations they have. So we're all in that, and we're all in this. And like you said at the beginning, social media is a big part of it. We see what everybody else is doing. That, to me, for me, I guess I'm getting to that age where that stuff doesn't bother me as much as it did when I was younger. As I was younger, I always was thinking, how do I get to that point where we have more and we can do more? But now it's like, my wife has a good job too. We can do more, but it's not all about that. But it is about having peace and having contentment in life. And so it kind of, I think the comparison trap kind of evolves as we get older in different periods of our lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to somebody who maybe goes to our church or goes to a church and sees pastors on stage like you, right, preaching the message every week, and they think to themselves, well, I'm never going to have a faith like that. I'm never going to be at a place where I can find the words to talk about Jesus like that. So therefore, I should not go into my work, into my school, into whatever, and preach or talk to people about Jesus, because I can't say things like Pastor Steve can. I can't, study the Bible the way that he can. I can't, I don't have the knowledge that he does. And so since I have this comparison against these people on stages and pastors and people in ministry, then I just might as well not try at all, right? There are very real people who live that way.
Sure.
And so how do we find boldness and confidence in who we are and the gifts that we've been given by God to preach his word, to tell other people about him, to serve other people, but not be weighed down by the fact that, man, there's always somebody who's going to do it better than me. I just think this is a very real challenge that we have.
Should we just both admit right here our insecurities that we both, every time I get up on stage, I feel not worthy of it. And I pray, say, God, give me the words to say. God, I don't know. I know what I plan to say, but God, let me honor you in this. Let people be drawn closer to you in this. And I believe that God equips every single person that's listening, for wherever they are, to spread his word. And not everybody is eloquent. Sometimes I feel eloquent. Sometimes I feel like a mess. That's not the point. The point is being faithful to what we're called to do, the message that we're called to share. And I'll tell you what I get. I get jealous of the fact that other people get to be around non-believers more than I do. I try to put myself in some places where I have those opportunities, but for those that get to work with people every day and have the chance to be a light in a dark place, I work on a church staff, so it's not a dark place. It's a bright place. It's a place I enjoy going to every day of work and being around people. And Sunday is like the highlight. Sunday morning, I love it because it's getting to be with all the church family. So yeah, but then I get what you're saying though. I see how people can, but we do the same thing. We look at other pastors that we think are way better than us at what they do, their craft compared to us. And so, man, if I could just be like them, communicate like them, then, the church would grow, more people would come to Christ. And I'm not good enough. I don't, whatever.
Right. So we keep coming back to this point that it doesn't matter where you are or where you work, what your job is, how good you are at something or not good at something. There's always people to compare yourself to, right? You could be the best of the best. Who's your favorite communicator of all time in the church world? Ready, set, go.
The first one that I come to is Andy Stanley.
Okay,
I love the way he preaches.
Even Andy Stanley has times where he doubts and compares himself to other people, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And so if this is a universal problem, what do we do? I just think it's something that maybe even more than we realize, it keeps us kind of stagnant in our faith and stagnant in what we're supposed to do because we just get weighed down by comparing ourselves to other people. I think it's so real. And I think so many people who are listening to it are just stuck in this cycle of comparison. And I think in order to really walk by faith and not by sight, in order to really spread the news of Jesus like we're supposed to do, we have to get over this hurdle of, well, I'm never going to be as good as that person is, so therefore I shouldn't do it at all. And so I just think we need to, right now, here in this moment, come up with real ways to get past it. Let me ask
you this question, because this is how I feel. After preaching a sermon, which we both do, I can get 10 amazing compliments about it, how it spoke to them, how it was, blah, 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 blah. If I get one that's negative, that's the one I think about. I mean, you know what I mean? I focus on like what I didn't do, or I can feel just bad that something I didn't say didn't communicate well, and it doesn't matter. And we can be very hard on ourselves with that. So I think we have to get comfortable with who we are. Like, I think to answer your question, I think that we have to, first of all, realize God created us the way we are. I am not supposed to be Andy Stanley. I'm not supposed to be any of those people that I look at and think they're like the best preachers that I've heard. That's not who God made me to be. And, maybe I'll never have their audience. That's okay. God put me where I am for a reason to reach certain people where I am in my life. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm always supposed to be growing. I'm always supposed to be improving, always supposed to be trying to get better. But that doesn't mean comparing myself to the point that I'm trying to be like them. Have you ever heard, and I've been guilty of this back, I remember when I first was a lead pastor planning a church, certain pastor, it wasn't Andy, it was another one I really liked. And he was a great communicator. He is. And I kind of did a series that he had done, and I tried to do and say some of the things the way he said it. And it came off so lame. Like, it was embarrassing. Like, why am I trying to be like that person and say things where they do? That's not who I am. But there's that inner turmoil of like, is who I am good enough? And, I've been doing this, like, for almost 30 years in ministry, and I still, every day, I'm like, how am I doing this? How, where does this come from? What am I supposed to do next? Like, why am I in this position that I'm in?
So is it possible that one of the biggest steps to getting out of this comparison trap is accepting the fact that you're never going to be perfect, accepting the fact that, to some degree, God did create you to be who you are, right? He knew you when you were in your mother's womb. He knows the amount of hairs on your head. He knows you better than anybody else, and he's designed you with a unique set of skills and abilities that nobody else has the way that you have, right? Along with that, he's paired those unique set of skills and abilities with a unique set of circle of influence that nobody else has. And so I think maybe what you're saying is, in fact, maybe one of the most beautiful things that we can do in this idea of comparison and accepting who we are, all of those things, is accept the fact that we're not perfect, accept the fact that we are broken, accept the fact that we're always going to have insecurities and doubts, but everybody else does too. And therefore, if we can live from those things, not like, man, I'm just going to try to cover them up and be perfect and be like that other person that I see, but instead just say, okay, God, you designed me to be this way. You know my heart, you know my mind, so use me the way that you want to use me. I think that's really what we have to do.
I do too. I agree with you. I think for me, I'm being vulnerable and admitting that, but I do feel that I'm better than I was 10 years ago. Like I was, and then 10 years before that, as I think it's just one of those things, as you get older, hopefully you mature and you get more comfortable with who you are and realizing that, because you don't have to be a pastor to struggle with this. And we're not just talking about that. We're just talking about what we are, what we do. But
Mike Todd, which is one of my favorite pastors, talked about him last week, but he has a really, really simple saying that he says all the time to his church. And he always says, I'm not perfect, but I'm progressing. And his whole point, he says all the time to everything they talk about. But his point is, I'm not perfect and I never claim to be, but I'm attempting and trying to be more like Jesus, to trying to progress to be more like him. Because that's what we're called to do, is to be more like Christ in everything that we do. So let me ask you this. Should we compare ourselves to Jesus? If comparison is unhealthy to a certain degree, once it gets past a certain point, it can become really detrimental to our self-image and worth and all those things. Should we compare ourselves to Jesus, though? Right? If we're called to be like him and we're called to strive to try to be Christ-like in everything that we do, does that mean that there is a healthy way to compare yourself to somebody?
I think so, because one of the other things Paul said, I think it was Ephesians, he said, follow me as I follow Christ. So he is following Christ. We're disciples. That word actually can kind of mean apprentice. We're like supposed to be learning to be just like him. So if you compare to him, you're always going to fall short, right? So like you said, we're supposed to be getting more and more like him, like Pastor Todd said, but you think about this, in your walk with God, you want to be able to look back and think, okay, am I closer to Christ than I was last year? And you can't look at day by day, because that can be, we all have days. But I think if you look over time, like, so I became a Christian when I was 10, and now I'm 51. So like 41 years now, like hopefully I'm growing, and I can look back at where I was 10 years ago, 5, 10, 15 years ago, and see how I've grown. And I think that we should compare ourselves to Christ. I think that's healthy, as long as we understand that we are not him. He is perfection. He's the Son of God. So we will be like him completely one day. When we are in heaven, we will become like him. We'll have his righteousness on us. We'll be just like him. But I tell people sometimes when they ask the big theological word sanctification, that's the process of becoming like Christ. In our lives, it shouldn't be just that we live our lives, we believe in Jesus, but we live just the same. And then all of a sudden one day we die, and then there's this incredible change to who we are now. It should be this gradual change in our lives to the point that we step out of this life into heaven, and it's, okay, now we're perfect, but we're not that far away from it because we've been getting more and more like Jesus our whole lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a healthy way, and it should motivate us to be more like Jesus in a way of, okay, I'm not like him, but what can I do to be more like him today, right? And going back to the conversation of the fact that sometimes this comparison trap can stop us from spreading the good news of Jesus. I heard something interesting one time that I forget who it was. So if you're out there and you're listening, please tell me that this was you. But I heard, this idea that the moment that we were saved, the moment that we believed in Jesus and we stepped into a relationship with him and we were saved for eternity, if we had no other point or purpose on earth, if that was the end of it, was just to be saved, that was the goal of our lives. In that moment, why wouldn't God zap us and take us to heaven? Right? But he didn't. And the reason for that is because we are not just people who are supposed to receive Christ. We're supposed to help others understand why we're in that boat. And if you're somebody who doesn't take the bold steps to walk by faith, but instead just says, well, I'm not going to be, say it the right way. I'm not going to live it exactly the right way. So therefore I better not do it. You may be missing out on, a plan that he has for life, or people directly in front of you that need to know the message of Jesus that you're just missing out on because you're comparing yourselves to other and therefore doubting the influence that you do have. So I just think it's really, really important to remind yourself that it's not about you. Okay. Like, it's not about how good you are, how not good you are, how qualified you are, how not qualified you are. It's about Jesus. It's about the fact that he has already paved the way and paid the ultimate debt for you. So therefore, because of it's no longer based on your requirements or your actions or how good you are, you should be like, oh my gosh, I need to tell other people about this. Even if I stumble on my words and mess up and somebody else could say it better, it doesn't matter because I'm still doing it. Right? It's not about being perfect. It's about, like you said, being obedient and being faithful.
That's right.
So I think that's a great place to end for today. If you have anything else you want to add.
No, this has been good, man. I feel like we both kind of shared a little bit from our hearts, and just kind of, I think it's just good for everybody to know, like we step on that stage and we are being obedient to what Christ has called us to do, but it is a humbling thing. I mentioned Andy, but Craig Groeschel, another one of the pastors that I love, he says that he feels, and he's the largest church in America potentially with all the campuses they have, he feels like every time he gets up to speak, he feels those nerves, and he says he takes one step forward and he prays. He says, God, I'm stepping out of me and into you, and I want you to take over me during this next 30 minutes. And it's something that I've been trying to do myself, just following that example. And I think even though that's a stage thing for me, for you, everyone that's listening can do that very same thing.
Absolutely.
It's not about us. And that's the problem with comparison. When we get so wrapped up in it's us, it's not. It's about Christ in us. And that's why we're here, to bring him glory and bring people to Jesus. So.
Yeah. I mean, what if the next time you stepped into a conversation with a coworker or a neighbor or somebody you didn't know, and your mindset was that same thing of, God, I'm stepping out of me and I'm stepping into you. I want you to take over. I want to be an instrument for what you want to say and what you want to do. I promise you, he will move, right? If you take the pressure off your shoulders and say, God, I want you to carry this, like, he can speak through you and use you in ways that you didn't think he could. So
and the results aren't up to you.
Right.
It's up to God. So you're just supposed to be faithful. Share the message. So,
absolutely. Well, this has been good. Last kind of thing that I have, how can you see God in the comparison trap? How can we see God in this idea of comparison, this idea of comparing ourselves to others, the healthy way of comparing ourselves to Jesus or mentors that we have in our lives? Where's God in that? Where's God in comparison? What would you say?
I mean, we've hit on some scriptures today, and I think one that you quoted early is that in the Psalms where David said, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and God made you to the way you are. I mean, you're supposed to be continuing to improve in your life, but in creation, we see God created each one of us. That's clear in Scripture. Yeah. And so He doesn't make mistakes. And so He made you the way that you are, with your flaws, with your failures. And we're supposed to be more like Jesus, but never look at yourself in the mirror or look at your what you've produced in your life and think, well, I'm a failure. No, God didn't make mistakes. God doesn't make junk. I believe that. And so I think we see God can work in anybody, and it's amazing to see how he does that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're somebody right now who is feeling stuck in this comparison trap or doubting yourself, go back and listen to that last minute and a half, because I really think there's some super encouraging things in what you just said. And I think that, God really wants us to see the fact that he made us and he designed us with all that we are, with all the flaws, with all the brokenness. And he's just waiting for a day where we step over the line from earth into heaven and he redeems everything that we are and makes us perfect and beautiful in him. So this has been awesome. Yeah. Thank you for some of your time this morning.
Thank you.
If I know we talk about this sometimes, but please send in podcast ideas and topic ideas to podcast@sycamorecreek.org. We would love to hear what you guys want to talk about going forward in the next couple months of this show. We just want to make it better, and we want to reflect what you guys want us to talk about. We want to make it what you want to listen to. So that's all that I have. Do you have anything else you want to add?
That sounds good.
All right. Have a fantastic week. We love you. See you later. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.